This is a podcast from comedianscomedian.com.
This is the Comedian's Comedian podcast. Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Stuart Goldsmith, and at last I'm able to bring you this conversation with Joe DeRosa, which was very much the lost episode of the Comedian's Comedian podcast. It was recorded at the Edinburgh Festival 2016 outside a cafe, so you should hear some quite pleasant wild track of cafe background comings and goings. And I physically lost the episode. I misplaced it somewhere, and it took me a long time to find it. And initially I forgot that I had to look for it, and then I did look for it, and it became a tiresome administrative story, which I won't go into now. But ultimately, I have it, and I'm very pleased to bring it to you. So with apologies to Mr. Joe DeRosa for leaving him off the list for so long, I can at last now bring you this show, and I think you're really going to enjoy it. He's a very different voice. He's we talk a lot about punk and music and the influence that has on his comedy, and he has integrity, and we talk about his refusal to kind of toe the comedy party line, and just hear about the reflection of his real life in his work. I think you're going to really enjoy this episode with an excellent comedian, and I'll say no more. I'll chat to you in the middle bit. This is Joe DeRosa.
You do your own podcast, but you don't enjoy the act of... Which aspect is it?
I mean, I feel lucky to have a podcast, and I do enjoy the fact that people listen and care about what myself and my co-host Pat Walsh, think and have to say about horror movies and other things, particularly horror movies. But I don't listen to podcasts, so there is always going to be that element where even though I do enjoy doing it and appreciate having a listenership for it, there's always that part of me that doesn't quite understand why or how it's working, because I wouldn't listen to it. That's very, the truth. I don't listen to any podcasts at all. I just can't. I mean, maybe it's because I talk for a living, but just the idea of sitting and listening to people talking is not interesting to me in any way.
Okay. And presumably there is an element to which you enjoy saying that, to open a podcast interview by kind of saying, hey there, podcast listeners. There's got to be something quite delicious about that, about going, I hope you're enjoying this, but you're all,
Well, I'm not shitting on these people. I'm not saying you're lesser than I am intellectually because you enjoy it or something like that. I just don't particularly enjoy it, so I don't understand. It's like sports to me almost in a way. Yeah. I don't watch sports at all because I just don't get it. But
Have you tried? I've tried.
Yeah, I've tried. I can't get into it. I've tried with podcasts. So I don't defame or demean people that like podcasts. I just don't get it. It's not my thing. But I do love horror movies. So I like doing my podcast because I get to talk about horror movies, and it's this great added bonus that people actually want to listen to it. That's very nice. And it's very fun when you do a live one, which we've only done one, but when you get to do a live one and there's the audience, now it feels like a thing is happening to me. But, this is, I'm in awe that people, I'm not saying because you're not good at this, this is your thing, but if anybody sees my name and goes, oh, I want to listen to that, I'm like, that's very weirdly flattering and confusing to me.
Do you engage with the listenership of your horror podcast? Do you answer emails and stuff like that?
We don't really get emails, but we respond to the fans whenever we can. We get Twitter and stuff like that, and we get requests to talk about certain movies, and we try to cover those and attend to those as best we can, and we try to stay in touch with the fans. We got a few really diehard people that really write to us a lot per every episode, but it's fun going out and meeting people in one way or another.
Do you watch much TV?
No, I watch a lot of movies, and when I do watch TV, it's strictly binge watching. Anything from, that's either a DVD box set that I purchase or something on Netflix or Amazon or whatever that I can watch episode after episode. But I don't have cable. I don't sit in front of the TV. I don't flip through the channels.
Okay. And what would you say then is what do you do most often with your leisure time when you're not on the road, when you're not gigging? How do you like to unwind?
My leisure drinking is very fun. I enjoy going out to bars with my friends and having drinks and things. I love buying music. I'm an avid music fan and collector.
Okay.
So I buy vinyl incessantly. I am one of those people that doesn't buy it out of the... I appreciate the trendiness of it now because it's been made readily available, but I'm not buying it for that reason. That's just allowed me to indulge my appreciation more, because I am one of those people that really does think it does sound better. Like, I do like the sound of it better, and it's more of an experience. So I really enjoy doing that. I could go to record stores literally every day and dig through crates and whatever. I also really enjoy shopping for films, horror movies mainly. I have a really extensive Blu-ray and DVD collection. And then just, I write too. I write short horror fiction, so that's even though that's kind of work, it's like that's kind of leisure time for me. And
okay. And do you publish your horror fiction?
Fangoria.com, the website.
Okay.
The magazine is Fangoria. Fangoria is a magazine in the States. It's the Rolling Stone.
I think we either get it here or used to. I've certainly seen it.
Yeah, it's like the Rolling Stone of horror movie magazines. So they put our podcast out, their network does, and the website publishes my stories.
Okay.
Once a month. We just started. I think the second one is like about to come out.
Okay.
So we'll be doing that for a while, and I mean that's fun,
I noticed when you were on stage, I saw your show on Saturday night, and you were wearing a Motorhead t-shirt, specifically Motorhead England, which I thought was an interesting move in Scotland. I don't know if that had occurred to you at the time.
No, it's just I love Motorhead, and I think Mickey D, the second drummer, was from Scotland.
Okay.
So I felt like that was okay.
You'd get through on a technicality.
Yeah, and the amount of rare Motorhead vinyl I have found in Scotland, for dirt cheap, is insane.
Excellent.
It's insane.
And is that typical of your music taste? Are you specifically into like metal, rock, or hard rock, and stuff like that?
I like all kinds of stuff. If I had to narrow it down to the stuff I like the most, at least right now, I love gangster rap so much. I love provocative rap.
Yeah.
Anything in the hardcore zone. Not so much newer stuff, but I'd say stuff. The stuff I really love is 2000 backwards. From there,
okay,
year 2000 back. That's my favorite stuff. So I still explore that music greatly and try to learn and listen to as much of it as I can. And then I also really, really like old, like early 80s, late 70s American, for the most part, punk rock bands.
Okay.
And I like the English bands too, but there's just something about the American sound, like that old Black Flag stuff and Minor Threat.
I saw you tweet. You saw Henry Rollins the other night.
Yeah.
How was that? I've been trying to get Henry on the show for a long time. He won't come on. I'm a lifelong Henry Rollins fan.
It was incredible. It changed. It was a game changer for me.
Yeah.
As a performer, to see that live, and to see he's doing what I want to do.
Yeah. Well,
I want to do like that. I want to perform like that. The funny part of comedy was always a technicality for me. It was always something that I had to do to be able to talk about the stuff I wanted to talk about, or it's always been. So there's a certain pressure that comes from, there's got to be a certain amount of laughter because you're a comedian. If I had my way, and maybe one day I will, I'd much rather be a guy like Henry Rollins who can basically perform his writing, and then it also happens to be humorous because he's a charming and funny person.
Yeah. But
the emphasis is not on comedy.
If there was a spoken word circuit that paid the same as the comedy circuit,
right,
that would be where you'd want to be at.
I would switch today, and that's not out of any disrespect to comedy. I love comedy, I've been a fan of comedy probably before I was a fan of anything.
What were the first comedy things you remember seeing when you were a kid?
I mean, the one that really resonates is when I saw Bill Cosby himself when I was very young. I was probably 5 or 6 when I saw that movie, and my parents and I watched it, and it was all stuff about him and his kids, and getting frustrated with your kids, and your kids not listening, and hitting your kids, and all this stuff. And my parents and I were laughing equally hysterically in the living room watching it, and that really affected me, because I was like, at the time I didn't fully understand how profound that was, but now looking back I'm like, my God, the guy was doing comedy that a 6-year-old and a 36-year-old thought was equally hilarious for completely different reasons.
Was that an unusual time for you and your family to all be laughing together? That feels like a very kind of passionate, like a therapist would call that, some sort of like a cornerstone experience.
It was, because we very much reflected what he was as a family reflected what he was talking about in the stand-up special, which was a lot of yelling and people not listening. And
okay, did you have a large family?
No, it was just me and my parents. Extended family was a decent size at one point. A lot of them have died at this point, but no, my household was me and my parents, and I was adopted. I almost had more of a sort of a sibling relationship with my parents.
That's interesting.
I mean, they're my parents, and I look at them as my parents, and I respected them as my parents. But it's a very different dynamic when you're the only child. It's a very candid, because that's it. There's no older brother to go to and say, I tried pot in college. I just told my parents, I was like, yeah, I smoke pot now. And they were like, well, what? And I was like, yeah, there's nothing you can do. I'm 18, but I'm just letting you know, I smoke pot. I won't do it in the house. And they were like, okay, well, I'm not crazy about that, but
yeah.
So it's just a very different, at least for me it was. But before we get too far down that road, I want to say, me saying I want to switch styles or whatever, or wish I could. Again, it's not any disrespect to stand-up comedy. I'm a huge fan of comedy, and I have an immense admiration for the art form, and it is something I enjoy doing and I want to be doing. But I think in a perfect world, to me, it would be nice to take the focus off of the laughter, put the focus more on the content, and then have the laughter be the added bonus to it. I would really enjoy that, because I think it would open up the writing a little bit.
I'd be surprised if any comedians kind of took offense at that, or took a professional offense at it. I mean, to me, that sounds like a really...
Well, many comics, I don't know if take offense is the right term, but many comics go, have the mentality of like, well, you're a comic, just be funny, shut up, nobody cares. And it's like, yeah, that's not what attracted me to it. What attracted me to it was George Carlin, and this guy who has admittedly said he was a writer that performed his writing, and it's very obvious when you watch it that that's what's going on. And I just really got off on that, like a guy giving his opinion to people, whether those people agreed with it or not, which, he was very counterculture. So a lot of the time I'm assuming people didn't. But
have you got bits of material that you developed over... How long have you been a comic now?
15 years. Almost 15 years.
And do you have bits of material that you feel have done that job? Do you have bits of material that you've thought, yeah, the laughs are there, but I'm also saying exactly what I wanted to say?
Yeah. You do get those, and it's great when that happens. So that's the other side of it, and that makes me wonder if I didn't have to sort of work it through this equation of comedy, maybe I would actually get lazier, or maybe it would be less rewarding, because I will say there's nothing more rewarding to me than when you somehow fit. I have a big chunk in my act right now about death and my fear of death, and there's a part in there about suicide too. That's where the premise, because I don't have time to go into it, is more or less some people should commit suicide. and you'll just have to hear the bit
Sure.
to understand.
Yeah, I've heard the bit. It's a good bit.
Yeah, I'm sure somebody heard me just say that and was like, what?
It's okay.
But my point is like bits like that are things that I've tried before and didn't work. People walk out, you know. When I first started doing the suicide bit, people were walking out of the show in relevant enough numbers that it was upsetting me after the show. I was like, oh, God. You know, so then when you finally click and you get it to work and they're laughing and they get where you're coming from, that's really an amazing thing. You know, the death stuff, I tried for a long time to talk about that because it is a really crippling fear that I have. And it was always too dark, you know. I tried talking about depression and it was too dark. And then eventually I would figure out how to talk about these things. And when you get people laughing, and then people sometimes coming up to you after the show and saying, hey man, thanks for talking about anxiety. That was like really, you know, the anxiety material I have is actually not doing as well here as it does in the States because I think it's a different mentality.
Yeah. Yeah, even mentioning, like you said on stage about having a therapist, and you said, so who else is in therapy? And like 2 people admitted it on the night I saw.
Right.
There's a different feeling, you know, not everyone, I don't think people feel ashamed or secretive about it. It's just something that you wouldn't mention in public. They were probably all thinking, oh, I wasn't expecting to be asked that question.
Exactly. So, but there was a night, I keep doing it because there was a night where a kid came up to me and went, he's like, this is my best accent attempt, but he's like, mate, thanks for the bit about anxiety, you know, thank you. And it was like, that's a really special moment to have with somebody. Yeah. I've had that the most with that joke out of anything. People come up and go, dude, thank you for doing that bit. Like, my wife has terrible anxiety, and that really made her feel like it was okay, and like, and that she could laugh about it. And
when you say
nice.
When you say that's the bit that has most earned that response from people, why do you think that is? Do you think that's because if you're talking about kind of therapy and suicide and death and other things which people are, you know, have like deep-seated worries about, why do you think it's the anxiety stuff that they're particularly responding to? Is that because it's less usual?
My guess would be that it has to do with what you just said about like people going, oh well, we don't talk about that.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't think it's a taboo thing necessarily, but I certainly think it's sort of ingrained into everybody if you're out in public and amongst strangers and meeting new people especially, or for a fun night out with old friends or whatever it is, you know, nobody's going, hey guys, you know, I'm really having these panic attacks. Like, does anybody else have a hard time getting out? No, hold on, before you blow out the birthday candles. Does anybody else not want to get out of bed in the morning? You know what I mean? Like, so it's one of those things where I think like when you see somebody make light of it, not make light of it, but talk about it in a humorous way where it becomes relatable suddenly and human. It's probably, I guess, relieving for somebody. I never would have expected that. I thought I was the only one that knew what I was talking about, and then people started coming up to me and saying, hey, that really hit me. That
experience that you portray there of kind of being in a bar with your friends and no one's mentioning it, do you mean that to describe what it's generally like in our culture, or does that also resonate for your experiences of being out? You mentioned, you know, you like going out and drinking with your friends.
I think that's anywhere. I think that's anywhere. It seems a little more present here, but I think that's anywhere. I think that's... You know, I think if you're out to have a good time, you're out to have a good time. Look, America has its superficialities, obviously. It's very obvious, you know. I'm not saying anything new. But we just have them in different ways, you know.
Yeah.
So as much as a therapy enthusiast from America might look at the non-discussion of, you know, or the sort of coiling up at the mention of anxiety here as being maybe superficial to certain people, and going, well, that's you should be able to talk about that. That's the human condition or whatever. I don't feel that way, but there are definitely people that would, you know.
I suppose.
But in America, it's just a different perspective. It's like, no, you guys feel the same way we do about that stuff. It's just you react to it differently. You step back from it differently. Here, it's kind of like, things button up a bit and people seem to get a little silence. Like, we don't talk about that.
I think what I'm driving at is I want to ask whether you and your drinking buddies whether you personally have a culture where you can discuss your anxiety with them. Do you have a forum for that among your friends?
I mean, of course, they're my real friends, so of course, if I needed to, we could.
Okay.
But I guess the point I was getting at was Scotland may have the sort of button-lipped reaction to the mention of anxiety and things.
Yeah.
America's reaction is more like, dude, it's cool, you're great. But you know what I mean? So it's this sort of, it's a different reaction, but
I see.
It's still the same.
It doesn't get anywhere.
It's the same outcome.
Yeah.
In America, it's just a fake positive pep talk.
Yeah.
Whereas here it's just silence.
Yeah. So in neither case are they going, talk to me about that then.
Exactly. So my point is like anybody that wants to talk about those things could go, well, that's superficial, or that's superficial, or that, and it's like, yeah, but it's just a thing people don't like to talk about. You're out. It's time to have fun. I mean, it's not a 3 a.m., 2-hour heart-to-heart discussion with your Siamese twin that you were separated from birth with, and because you're in your grandmom's house and she just died and you're up and trying to that's not it. It's like everybody's like, dude, I was at work all day, man. I hate my job. I'm not crazy about my life. I'm trying to have some fun. How about you not be a downer right now? So that all being said, that is why it is rewarding when you can talk about those things and they do start to work. And suddenly now we're all laughing about anxiety or suicide or whatever. And it's like, wow, we got to a place here right now. This was hard. This was not easy. There were a lot of people walking out for months before we got here.
Yeah.
So this is very rewarding.
So this is Joe. Really fascinating to talk to him and get his take on all of it. You can catch up with a lot of his stuff online. I don't know if he's released anything since we had this conversation, but a simple typing of his name into a search engine, as you well know. I mean, these days, who even provides links to things? I should. Do you know what? I'm forever listening to other podcasts and they say, I'll link to that in the show notes. And there's very few links in my show notes. I try to keep things easier for Daryl, but more importantly for myself, reasoning that if you want to look up what Joe DeRosa's up to recently, you can just type his name into a search engine. But I feel like I should do something in the show notes. So look in the show notes and I will have attempted to do my best. So more from Joe in a sec. I've got an email I want to read to you, and also I should tell you the t-shirts. We're now, for the whole of October, the t-shirt post sale is happening. So I did this pre-sale a couple of months ago before Edinburgh. Eventually people got their t-shirts and very kindly took pictures of them and sent them in. Hey, listen, I know I talked about being unfit. You might hear I'm slightly out of breath now. This is allergy related, so if you hear me just slightly wheezing like that, I am having a little asthmatic moment. Please don't think that I am so unfit that I cannot finish a sentence. It might get that bad one day, but it isn't that bad just yet. So, as I was saying, we had a bunch of t-shirts. They went out. Eventually, they got printed and went out. And so what I'm going to do is now, throughout the whole of October, we're launching a post sale. So if you go to comedianscomedian.com / what is it, merch? I think it's merch. Let's say merch unless you hear differently. And you can, throughout the whole of October, order your t-shirt. It's the same one as went out before at a fractionally higher price to reward those people who got in quick. And then I feel like when they're gone, they're gone. I'm going to do that for October. Beginning in November, I'll get them all printed. You will have them in your hands, I solemnly promise, by the 1st of December. So if you want them as Christmas gifts for anyone else, you've got the whole month of October to secretly find out that person's size. There will be some ladies' sizes available, although we had an issue with the printing last time whereby we were told a lot more lady sizes were available than were. But what I mean is it's worth checking out because there will definitely be some lady sizes, and I will do my best to source t-shirts to fulfill the other ones. So That's the Polly Becker Thanks Man design that you might have seen people putting in the Facebook group or indeed on Twitter, or they might have just run up to you at a comedy festival. We were going to come up with a little hand gesture, weren't we? We had a couple of suggestions on the Facebook group. I might resurrect that because I never quite came to a conclusion. Some sort of gesture that you could use if you saw someone wearing a ComCom t-shirt from the first or second batches, that you could do a little physical symbol at them and go, oh yeah, you're one of us. Oh, I'm one of you too. Will we get on? Not necessarily. But there we are. So we'll get into that. So go to comedianscomedian.com/merch and you can put in your order. And then after that, yeah, I think that's going to be them. I was sort of thinking about printing some random size ones to go on tour with me when the tour kicks off next spring. I may do that. I may not. I might make the tour ones a different colour, which you can either prefer or not. That's a weird idea, isn't it? If I make some of them black and then the ones you got later are grey, the idea being, next time this will make people jump in quicker and buy t-shirts. But the grey ones might look better, and then I've punished the people who got in early, so maybe we won't do that. I've talked myself out of it. But there we go. There's that. If you would like to support the show with a donation, you know how to do that. Since some of you will know, I have recently switched from iOS to Android. I've got rid of my iPhone and got myself a sweet little Android phone. I have suddenly been made aware that there are loads and loads of podcast apps, rather than on iTunes where there's like the one main one. You can listen on others, but obviously iTunes is the daddy or the mummy, the senior figure. So you can do that on iOS, on iTunes, on your iPhone. Everyone basically goes through that one thing. On Android, there's hundreds of others. So if you are listening via Castbox, or what are some of the other ones? They're called Podcast Addict, Player FM, Audible. You can do podcast via Audible. Apparently, can you? Well, maybe not. But all of those sorts of things, if you're listening on those, then do us a favour and chuck me a review on those, or put something in the comments, because I've noticed very, very few people bother doing that. It's a really good way to keep my show visible as possible in the face of a huge amount of the podcast market now, which seems to be spin-offs from existing television shows and radio shows who already have an enormous fan base. So I don't mean spin-offs, like rebroadcasts of. So, I'm not expecting that we will one day top the charts of the Friday night comedy show from Radio 4, but the more visible this show gets, the better, because, it's a fierce, plucky little indie, which means I record these blurbs under a duvet. So if you fancy supporting the show like that, you can do that. Of course, you can go to comedianscomedian.com/donate, as you well know. Thank you to everyone who has donated recently, and you can do that in a recurring subscription way or in a one-off donation, as again you know. However, I wanted to read you this email because this is... Do you know, I'm going to save this email for the end. I'll chat to you, I'll talk about this email in the post-amble. I've said enough already, and I'm itching, as I'm sure you are, to get back to this conversation with Joe DeRosa.
Have you ever tried doing... We were talking about Rollins before. Have you tried doing spoken word? Have you tried doing stuff without the onus to be funny?
I've tried it, but but not at the right times. I would try to close my act with long, sort of 20-minute diatribe things.
In a comedy club?
Yeah. Or sometimes I would just go on stage and get a free show, non-paid show, and try to do it there for my 15 minutes that I had or whatever. I didn't know how to do it at all. If I were to try to do it now, what I would do is I would either do it as a residency where I was working on stuff every week somewhere, or I would go on stage and say to the audience, like, disclaimer, I'm trying to kind of move in a different direction here with this stuff, so it's not going to be whatever, so can I just do this? And I didn't know how to do that before. I would also pick my spots. I wouldn't be doing it at a comedy club on a Saturday night.
Sure.
I'd be doing it at a coffee house on a Tuesday night, So,
do you think there are different sort of I'm kind of the more I experience of American comedy and the sort of the lesser known over here American comedy, like we know a lot of the big guys in the UK, although I suppose on the comedy circuit everyone knows Carlin and Pryor and stuff. I think in terms of American comics that my parents could name, there's sort of almost none, But the more I dig into American comedy, I'm just wondering whether there are sort of I know what alt comedy is, or I've heard alt comedy described. There's sort of flavors of different types of comics. Like someone like yourself who talks about, death and despair and therapy and stuff like that as well, in a very funny way. And I really enjoyed the show. I thought the Jeffrey Dahmer stuff was fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
Good gear.
Thanks.
I wonder, of the different kind of products, if you'll excuse the expression, of American comics that we get over here, there are kind of political comics and there are kind of squeaky clean, kind of, on my way to being massive kind of comics.
Right.
Do you identify yourself as sort of fitting into a particular camp, into a particular style? Are there other kind of comics that you would be on almost like if you booked a show of the sorts of things you do?
I mean, as far as guys that are famous and much more notable and established than I am, I certainly relate to the Doug Stanhopes of comedy more than the Jim Gaffigans.
Yeah.
But I love Jim Gaffigan.
Yeah.
I think he's hilarious. And, I love Brian Regan. I think he's hilarious. But I wouldn't put myself in the same category, Like, it's just a different... I think comedy needs to be a little more diversified, I always use the music example. If you're, if you're Slayer, you play really hard thrash metal and really dark groove metal. It's like you don't try to do the same shit Katy Perry's doing. You might not have a problem with Katy Perry. You might even like Katy Perry. I don't know. But you don't try to do the same shit she's doing. And the problem with comedy, to me, is if we were all musicians, the average comedy bill would be like Slayer, and then Katy Perry,
yeah,
and then Loudon Wainwright, and then Rufus Wainwright. So it kind of made sense for a second there. And then Biohazard, and then Ice Cube. And you're like,
sure,
this doesn't make any fucking sense.
Yeah, because people are going out tonight to see music.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, I just went to see the Art of Rap tour, and it made sense. It was Curtis Blow, then Mobb Deep, then Ice-T, then EPMD, then Public Enemy. And it was like, yeah, this all fits.
Yeah.
This all locks together perfectly. This is brilliant. And it's like when I went to see Smokin' Grooves in the 90s, it was Cypress Hill and Gangstar and Busta Rhymes and Wyclef and groups that all made sense with the tone of Smoking Grooves and weed and, it all kind of just fit in together. And I think comedy gets treated all the time like a Lollapalooza kind of thing where it's like, well, we'll just throw everybody together. It'll be fine. And it's like, well, sometimes that works. But, it wouldn't hurt to break this up a little bit, a little more frequently. So it always shocks me that there's also this self-hatred, I think, in the comedy world where the second you start trying to define what you do, trying to describe what you do, trying to analyze it in any way, then suddenly you're an idiot and you're pretentious and you're this and you're that and you need to shut your mouth and all these things. And it's like, I get it, man. Anybody talking too self-importantly about what they do with too much admiration for what they do, yeah, it's gross. It's stupid. But for Christ's sakes, like, you can analyze your own stuff. You can say, like, when I go out on stage, my goal is to be this type of comedian because that's what I like. There's nothing wrong with that, But there's very little talk of it.
Why do you think that is? Given that we are anyone doing comedy is, I think, an artist, whether they know it or not, or whether they consider themselves an entertainer, whatever. We're all creating something. Why do you think it is that there is a culture, as you describe it, sort of? I don't know. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you've mentioned a couple of times the idea of kind of other comics, almost like ganging up on. People who want to self-identify or who want to sort of.
I think it's. I don't know. I think it's. I think comedy should be looked at more like music in general than a specific genre of music. And I think right now it's looked at as a specific genre of music. I think comedy is is similar to punk rock, or at least the way punk rock was at one point, where it's like, these are the rules. This is how it goes. And if you don't do these rules or follow these rules, well, then you're a sellout, or whatever term you want to put on it. The terms are different in comedy. But it's like, okay, but as we've watched punk rock grow over the years, and you watch a band, for example, like Green Day, go from being an underground sweatbox pop punk club band to being their own thing over here, and it's like, yeah, okay, so Green Day's like a rock band now. That's fine. They're not in that world anymore. You know what I mean? I think that's what happens with comedy. And instead of just going, guys, we're not all doing the same thing. Like, many of us are doing things that a lot of us disapprove of. And by the way, I'm way more on the fucking the old school punk mentality side of things. You know, like, I don't like what a lot of comedians do. And I don't mean on stage artistically. I just mean as human beings.
What sorts of things? What do you mean?
I think a lot of comedians are really self-serving. They're really demeaning people. You know, there's a certain fraternity or sorority mentality in comedy that we all need to stick together, which I do agree with for the most part. But Henry Rollins said something yesterday that just hit me like a fucking freight train. He goes, I don't believe in unity anymore. Unity doesn't work. And he's right. And it's like, I'm kind of tired of this idea that, like, we all have to stand together as comics, yet so many comics I know turn and eat their own, and, you know, would slit the throat of their sorority sister or fraternity brother to get their next paycheck or to move forward, you know? It's happened to me. It's happened to a lot of comedians. I don't agree with it. I don't agree with comedians faking it on stage and doing things that aren't true. I don't agree with that. That's not the way I feel about it. That's okay, though. That's why I say, so let there be punk comedy, and let there be pop comedy, and let there be swing comedy and rap comedy and whatever. And it's like, so then you guys go over there and do the EDM stuff that I'm not into. I'm going to be over here with the guys I like hanging around with because I like what they're doing and we have a similar mentality. And it's just not there yet in comedy. It's not there yet. Comedy's still getting treated like one genre, you know. And it's comedy is rock and roll, sure, but in the sense that rock and roll has expanded into several subgenres at this point, and that's what comedians need to start recognizing.
When you identify this sort of like kind of frat house or sorority kind of feeling, I feel like I know what you mean. I don't know that it exists. Either it doesn't exist to the same extent in British comedy, or I've just not experienced it. I don't ever feel like I've been, I don't know if we're talking about bullying or kind of victimized, or, you know, people, like it feels like there's a lot more in US comedy. There's just more comedians. There's probably more money at stake. Everything's heightened.
Well, there are more comedians. I don't know if there's more money at stake or not, because you guys have a pretty good system over here. I never crunch the numbers, but, you know, there's money over here. Yeah. Which is nice. But and there's money in the States. But, I mean, you guys also haven't been, I'm assuming, inundated with, you know, fucking documentary every other month about the plight of the comedian. I mean, it's you know.
Yeah, apart from this show.
Yeah, just every month or two, I feel like there's some documentary comes out where it's just comedians talking about comedy and how important it is and how we're just this special breed and all this shit. And it's like, well, yeah, so we're fucking architects, man. You know? It's like, stop. It annoys me. It really annoys me. It's an art form that in its purest is supposed to be, in my opinion, uplifting people and fighting for the little guy and the minority voice. And so many comedians use it to just celebrate themselves.
I 100% agree with that.
Really gross to me. And it's like that scene in Malcolm X in the movie when he like realizes Elijah Muhammad's impregnated all the women in the Nation of Islam, and he just can't believe it. And and he's like, but this is not, what are you doing? And then there's that great scene where Denzel Washington's talking to I can't remember the actor's name, but the guy that plays Brother Baines, and he's like, and he starts repeating the words, the speech he gave him in prison that roped him into the nation, where he's like, this is God's word, this ain't no hustle, and all that shit. And he's, I feel like that's what comedy, I feel like there are guys that are like over here being like, no, I'm like trying to do like this,
good work somehow.
Like good work. And I'm not saying like we're going to change the world, because as I sit here and talk about not being self-important, I also can't say we're supposed to change things. I don't mean it like that.
Yeah. But there's an essential purity to like the joy of making people laugh. It's supposed to be
rebellious.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
It's
Rebellious.
supposed to be mischievous and rebellious, just like punk rock is.
Yeah.
And there are just so many comics that use it as a way to just be like, look, aren't I great? And it's like, no, you're not. You're not. And what you're doing is not that special. And stop worrying about your fucking notoriety and your fame and who likes you and who doesn't. And stop. Like, stop. The fact that comedy clubs exist in malls.
Yeah.
And I've played them. And I'm not saying they've always been bad, but the fact that exists, it's like, what? What is happening?
How successful do you consider yourself as a comic?
I mean, by my own definition of success, I consider myself successful. Like, I feel very lucky that I have any sort of relevance in the business, meaning that there are people that have an interest in what I'm doing. I feel lucky about that. I feel lucky that when I want to put out an album, I can put out an album. And I have opportunities to do that with different outlets if I want. I'm doing my first hour special in a month or two, whatever it is, when we shoot. And I feel very lucky to get to do that. I'm far from being, far from being wealthy. I don't own property. I rent. And that's not a choice. It's just where I'm at. But my bank account's not empty. And I can wake up when I want to. And I can call my own work hours. And I don't have a boss. And it's been that way for about 13 of the 15 years. And I have enough money to go buy the records I want to buy. And I can buy the clothes I want to buy, I don't have to just go to the sales rack anymore. So that's nice. But to me, these are big, those are monumental victories to me. And it sounds like small potatoes, I'm sure, to most people. But it's a good life, man. Like, I didn't start doing this to be famous. Like, if that comes with it, great. That's fine with me. But like, I don't have a goal to go be in a movie just to be in it. It's like, I want to be in a movie I want to be in, Do you think that you would feel the same way about that stuff you said just a moment ago about people mistreating the thing, mistreating the rebellion, using it self-serving, using comedy in a self-serving way? Do you think that, I think I'm asking, just about you personally, do you think you would feel that way if you had caught a bigger wave earlier on? If you were now super successful, do you think you would, and I'm not, obviously you're successful, but do you know what I mean? If you were massive, do you think you would still maintain that kind of punk rock spirit of going, look, I'm doing the right thing with this? It's a tough question. It's always a tough question to answer, the what if scenario, right? But I will say this. I think with all confidence, I could have been on that wave. I moved very quickly when within 2 years of starting comedy, I was doing it full-time professionally. Under 2 years, I did my first Montreal Comedy Festival, New Faces, at a time when it still kind of meant something to do New Faces. I did my first late night spot on TV on NBC a year and a half in. Like, it moved very quickly. What prevented it from continuing to move that quickly was my insistence on doing the material I wanted to do and no longer wanting to do jokes about strip clubs and sex or whatever was doing at that time that I just didn't feel like doing anymore.
Okay.
That without question, held me, in some interpretations, held me back. In my interpretation,
You stuck to what you believed in.
yeah, it helped me get to this place now where I'm living the life I want to live and doing the material I want to do.
Yeah.
But I've walked away from things. I don't want to, out of tact and professionalism, I won't get into details, but
Okay.
like I've walked away from some pretty crazy opportunities.
But what did that feel like to walk away from something, knowing that
Great.
if you walk away from it, no one will know that you walked away from it?
Oh, I didn't care about that. If I cared about that, I'd be naming names and doing all these
Sure.
things right now. But it felt great to walk away. Just period. The general feeling, it felt great. It felt great to walk away without fear and go, okay, well then maybe that thing will never happen. I don't care. I'd rather be happy. I'm not doing that. Sorry, bye. And I didn't do it like a prick. I did it like a professional.
That's a big difference.
well,
That's a big difference.
That's the thing too. It's like I don't believe in torching bridges and whatever, but I also don't believe in diplomacy at all costs. You know, I'm a human being. I try to be as respectful a human being as I can be, and I try to be a professional in my job because I appreciate that I get to do this for a living.
Who was that New Faces era Joe DeRosa when you were, like you were saying, doing material about strip clubs and stuff? Do you think you had hit upon, do you think you'd stumbled upon a particularly marketable version of yourself?
Yeah, it was a lot of fake anger. You know, my anger now on stage only comes out in a moment where I actually get a little angry. You know, last night the audience wouldn't answer a question I kept asking them. And then finally some guy was like, no, mate, we know what you're talking about. And I was like, then fucking answer me. You know, and it was like, it was funny. It was a funny moment, but I was annoyed. But like I used to scream like that on stage for delivery purposes.
Yeah.
Now if I'm loud on stage, it's only a means to get attention if I need to get them worked up a little bit.
Yeah.
But I used to go on stage and be like, I'm so pissed at this. I'll never forget this. This was one of the many, sort of career changing moments you have. I walked off stage. When I first became friends with Bill Burr, he came down to meet me at Gotham Comedy Club in New York City. And he said, I was all excited because I was like, I made friends with a real comedian, and I had other friends we were all doing it full time at that point, but he was a guy that I had actually watched before I started.
Yeah.
So I was really like, oh my God, I made friends with a guy that like I was a fan of, like, and he came down to Gotham and I saw him walk in while I was on stage and I was killing. And I used to close with this thing about how much I hated text messages when they first came out. I'm holding a phone. Why am I typing? Stupid, right?
I'm enjoying your diffident attitude towards the bit.
Yeah, not a great bit, but I came off stage and I was just waiting for him to go, kid, you got it.
Yeah.
And he said, DeRosa, one day you're going to figure out what you're actually angry about. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, come on, dude, you're not that mad about that. And I was like, yeah, I guess you're right. And he was like, yeah. He's like, you don't want to be the angry guy. Don't be the angry guy. It's cheesy. And I was devastated, but it was such good advice because it made me start slowly chipping away at like, okay, well, what do I really want to talk about?
Yes.
But
that angry guy was being offered lots of stuff.
I wouldn't say offered lots of stuff, but
sure,
I feel
but
like
it was
that would have been my way. Yeah, that would have been my. It certainly would have meant, at the very least at the time, continual work in the clubs, steady work in the clubs of New York as a comic, which would have opened things up, I'm sure, for late night sets or whatever. And instead, I became what was probably known as a more inconsistent comedian in the clubs, because I was trying to figure it out. And I was trying to get away from it, and I was just kept writing and writing and writing. And there were people that were immensely supportive through that on the paying side of things. I mean, Louis Ferranda at Caroline's, Caroline at Caroline's, Greg Charles at Caroline's, Chris and Steve Mazzilli and Sean Flynn at Gotham. At that time period, those were two venues that were like, dude, we get it. We get that you're doing something. We believe in you. We're with you. So I was lucky to have that, you know? And I was also smart enough that, like, you know, when I wouldn't, well, no, that's not true either. There were times where I blew some opening spots for people. I was going to say, you know, I knew when to stop trying to, but there were definitely times when I tanked an opening spot. But I was lucky in the sense that I think most of those guys were pretty forgiving for the same reasons.
That format of like that's not something we have so much in the UK. Like it's like if someone's I've seen this in Montreal. Someone does an hour, but it's an opening 10, and then they do 50.
Right.
And so the etiquette of that is you absolutely do your best stuff as the 10. Is that right?
Yeah.
Or like you don't take risks.
Yeah. And there were most of the time I did. I was lucky that by the time I started doing opening spots, I had a much better grasp on what I was trying to do.
Okay.
So people got behind me and brought me around that I think many of them knew I probably wouldn't get the breaks that certain other comics would get monetarily.
Okay.
Patton Oswalt was always incredibly supportive, and he's still a friend. Burr was, you know, Burr's like a mentor and a brother to me at this point. Chappelle, very lucky there, you know. These were guys that just were like, I like what you're doing, man. Like, come make some money with me. Because
what you're suggesting is that they recognized in you the fact that you weren't taking that route of going, I'm gonna do the easy branding thing, be the angry guy, and get the money.
I'm not saying that because that. I'm not saying like they saw the genius in me. I don't mean it like that.
No, not so.
I just mean like they.
What is a cool thing for an older comic to do? Or
they
more
like
experienced
they
comic
just
to
like
go,
me as a comic.
Yeah.
And they all kind of had this similar discussion with me at different times of like, dude, you're gonna figure this out. You're gonna figure this out, and when you do, it's gonna be great. And again, at the time, it kind of. At moments it would hurt, but then at other moments it was very gratifying. It was like, this guy believes in me enough to know it's not perfect right now, and it's far from perfect right now, but he's going to let me continue to grow on his watch, and he's also going to pay me to do it, which is nice. A lot of the clubs in New York City were not like that. They were like, you better get on stage, you better fucking kill. Mm-hmm. You better kill within the guidelines that we want you to kill, which means don't say this, don't talk about this, don't be too dirty, whatever. And then it's like, and if you don't, then see it, dude, because the audience is always right. And guys like that didn't have that attitude, you know?
And when you talk about working through the stuff, what does that look like? Are you writing exclusively on stage, or you said before you're sitting and writing? You go and sit in a cafe or an office or something, and
I write in all kinds of ways. Sometimes I write into a dictaphone or the recording app on my phone. Sometimes I sit at my computer and I literally write, you know. Sometimes I just get a loose premise and I go, that's a short thing. I can just kind of throw that out on stage. All different ways, but I find for the most part the stuff that sticks and becomes something greater is the stuff that I sit down and write at my computer.
Is that right?
Yeah.
That's interesting. I wouldn't have expected that from your style. Your style is very from the gig that I saw and from the little I've seen on YouTube. Your style is I don't know what quality of it is. There's some quality to it that I thought, this is you have a kind of an experienced quality to you that I thought, this is probably one of those guys that gets an idea and goes up and works through it in the club.
No.
So I'm interested to hear about the writing. So
I'm not great at ad-libbing.
What's your toolkit then for when you have an idea and you're trying to pull the funny out of it?
Well, when I write at the best process for me has been when I write at my computer, then I'll take it on the stage and do it. And a lot of the time what would happen is it would be too formal.
Yeah.
Again, wanting to just be able to just do it that way, but you couldn't. So then I have to start to strip it down and figure out what part.
To make it more conversational.
Yeah, and what parts were funny and whatever. And then out of this structurally written proper thing or whatever would come the 5-minute routine or whatever. Now, though, because I've been doing that a decent amount like that, now I'm a little bit better at writing it in the way I would say it when I sit down to write it. So did a thing about the Olympics last night, about how I don't like the Olympics. I hate it. I don't give a shit. It fucking bores me. I don't care, you know, like people are like, well, only a handful of people can do this. I'm like, only a handful of people can do astrophysics. I don't want to watch them stand in front of a chalkboard and solve equations. I don't give a shit. So I finally like wrote down all my thoughts on that. And the way I wrote it on my computer yesterday and the way I performed it last night were pretty similar.
Okay.
Because I wrote it much more casually. But, you know, if I'm writing one of my stories, then it's a completely different gear, you know? I don't write those like that. You know, those are written more like stories. Sure. Something you would read. But yeah, I guess that's been what it's been.
And when
process.
Can you give us an example of something that you have edited out of your stand-up? Something that you, I don't really mean gave up on, but like something that wasn't working and so you cut it adrift and why? I think sometimes it's quite an interesting way to look at how people write by asking what stuff didn't make it. Yeah, you know, there's always stuff that just doesn't work as well as you hope it will or initially think it will. I had a thing, you know, in the death material that I'm doing right now, there used to be a big chunk about what they do with your body afterwards, after you die. And your 3 options are burial, mortuary, or cremation. And the idea that none of those things were inviting, and here were all the different whatever. It just never... It was interesting to me, like to think about and to talk about, but it just never really hit, and it was kind of slowing everything down, and so you just cut it, you know. Like, oh well. How long did you keep trying on that before you binned it?
A while, but I didn't care about it enough to push it through.
Yeah.
The suicide bit, I believed in enough, and I cared about enough that when it wasn't working, I was like, I have to this has to work.
Yeah.
This is a good idea, and I believe in the opinion that I'm saying right now.
Yes.
I do believe that if you're threatening to kill yourself to people, you're doing it for attention and you're being manipulative and it's shitty, so go kill yourself then. I do believe that. I also believe that if you're having thoughts and you're really worried about it, the quiet ones, who are the ones that always do it, you should go talk to somebody because that's terrible and nobody wants you to kill yourself.
Sure.
But the reason I can say go kill yourself to people that are loudly saying it is because you're not going to do it. You're doing this for attention right now. And I really believe in that. So when people first didn't get what I meant by that, I was like, they will. I'll figure this out.
Yeah.
That was worth sticking it through.
And so maybe what was lacking in the cremation or, you know, the post thing was like the lack of a clear attitude in that same sort of way, like the desire to...
Well, you can't force an attitude into something. You know, my friend Jared Logan often says, you know, comedians, we always try to make everything global, you know?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just a bit. Sometimes it's just a joke, you know? And I agree with that. So if it's like, you know, the joke about burial versus cremation versus mortuary wasn't that funny, and I certainly didn't have an opinion on it.
Yeah.
Oh, I had an opinion on it,
Yeah.
but I mean, it wasn't a strong enough opinion that I was like, this is something I feel I need to express.
Yes.
So I just, you know, so there it goes. You know, that's the kind of stuff that usually gets dropped. I also will drop usually like small stuff, shorter stuff that doesn't, you know, I'm big on creating longer pieces. So if I have something small that doesn't really fit in anywhere, I don't know what to do with it. That's stuff I'll usually set aside for, you know, Saturday at the Improv when you have to do 12 minutes and it's sold out and people are having drinks. It's like, okay, now I can do those like short things I have.
Okay.
Because I need to get laughs right now. And they're funny and I believe in them, but they don't have a place in the bigger hour because they're just distractions from the other stuff.
Are you creatively satisfied with being on the mission? You know, like some people regard. I mean, do you regard comedy as a vocation? Could you do anything else?
You know, I don't know, because it's whenever I talk about that with comedians, you know, my take is I have no idea what it would be like to not know what comedy was. So if I left this now to do anything else, I would always remember comedy. I'm sure if you erased my mind, I could do another thing, I would think.
It's an extraordinarily literal answer to that question.
Yeah.
Steeped in horror movies, yes, if I was fully lobotomized.
Yeah. But I mean, I could see, like, you know, I really enjoy the fiction writing I'm doing, so I'm not anywhere near ready, you know, to go, oh, I won't do comedy anymore, I'll just do that. But it's plausible that one day maybe that would be a thing, or who the hell knows? I don't know. You know, if I ever got an acting gig on something I really cared about that was very regular, maybe. I don't know. But I don't know. I don't think those things will happen just yet, because I think my focus just isn't there. My focus is on my stand-up and performing these things.
What happens to punks as they get older?
Well, it depends. Hopefully you become like Henry Rollins, you know, where he's just a more enlightened version of his younger self, you know. You know, I love No Effects for that reason. You know, they're like, I love that they're still sort of the party band and whatever, you know. It's like Fat Mike, the lead singer and bass player, just went into detox. And look, you know, if the guy's sick, I want him to get help. I don't want him to die. But there was a sigh of relief when I read, like, that he was like, no, I'm not going sober. I'm just detoxing. I was like, oh, cool. You know.
Do you need, when you say a sigh of relief, do you kind of need him to still be going hard? Do you need that as some kind of like a totem?
It just helps, man. It just helps to have people out there that aren't like everybody else and that are still saying, go fuck yourself in their own way. And I don't think there are a lot of people out there like that, you know? So I love that there's, you know, I love that Ice-T is on Law and Order and a household name, and, you know, has like middle-aged housewives watching him every week, yet he still says stuff in the press that makes people furious. I love it. It's like, yeah, keep fucking doing that shit, man.
To whom are you most, who is, when you say go fuck yourself, who are you saying it to? Who's the biggest target group that you have in mind? Is it like people that you used to go to school with, or is it
people that think that their perspective and opinion is the right one? Don't fucking tell me how to think. Don't tell me what I'm allowed to say. Don't tell me what I'm not allowed to say. Let me have my own moral code. Let me have my own ethical code. And go raise some kids if that's what you want to do, is teach people, okay? Or go be a teacher. But don't fucking come into the entertainment business, sit here and tell me that, you know, these jokes aren't okay. This person is off limits. You can make fun of this guy, but you can't make fun of that guy. Fuck off. You know what I mean? Fuck off. You're lame and you're protecting yourself. It's transparent. It's self-interest. That's all it is. And it's completely transparent.
Is it any more or less self-interested than a comedian on stage espousing his own point of view? Or her own point of view?
Yeah. It's more. Because the difference between that and what I'm talking about is you can get on stage and say whatever you want, and I have the right to listen to that or not listen to it. But once you start taking it into a public forum and using your notoriety or celebrity or whatever it is, or even your Twitter followers, whatever, your platform, whatever that platform is, to start telling people how they need to think and how they're wrong and all this stuff, it's like, hey, nobody's closets are out of reach, okay? And
What do you mean by that?
you've all got skeletons.
Yeah, right.
You've all got skeletons. And you're going to sit there now like you've never done anything wrong in your life, or you've never done anything questionable or whatever. It's like, no, you're worried about your paycheck. You're worried about your empire and your legacy. It's like, that's not what you should be worried about. What you should be worried about is the person you are, how you're treating people on a regular basis. Fuck how, the magazines depict you. How did you treat the guy at the coffee machine earlier today? That's what's important. You know what I mean? So I just don't like people, and I'm not one of these, the PC police. I'm not one of those people at all. And trust me, I've been attacked far more harshly by the right than I have by the left. But I've been attacked by the left too. It's both sides. Well, fucking tell me I need to take my country back and Trump is saying all the right shit. Don't fucking tell me. Personally, you can tell me that. That's fine. You and I can have that discussion. But once you start telling me that on this big platform and trying to tell me, like, what I'm not allowed to say or whatever, or if you say that to me and then I disagree and then you scream at me. I tweeted the other day, hey, everybody, remember, don't vote. It doesn't matter, it doesn't count, and everything will still be shit. Some fucking asshole tweets at me, oh, another libtard. It's like, yeah, did you see the tweet before this where I made fun of Hillary? And you see the other tweet where I made fun of Trump?
Yeah.
And it's like, dude, I'm making a fucking joke, okay? But if you want to have a discussion, let's have a discussion. But don't come at me like I'm not allowed to say that. You know what I mean?
Do you think comedy is more vulnerable than it's ever been? Do you think comedy and the practice of the comedian is more vulnerable now than it was 10 or 15 or 20 years ago? Because I do feel like all of the time now, there's so often people, like the usual discourse of the day online is someone gets leapt on for a joke. Like I think today Ellen, did you read this? Yeah, she tweeted a picture of her and Usain Bolt. He's giving her a piggyback in the sort of Photoshop thing, and everyone's jumping on it and saying it's racist. And it sort of feels like I'm not remotely surprised to see that furore kick off. I'm like, oh yeah, that's what happens. People make jokes, and then the internet explodes.
I have a sort of contradictory opinion about that. I think, number one, comedians have brought it on themselves because they let people in.
How do you mean let people in?
They let the authorities in. Instead of sticking to their ethics,
they apologized
and continuing to be the rebellious types we're supposed to be. They were more interested in getting into movies and standing next to famous people. And once you start doing that, now the devil's in the church. You let them in, and now those people start playing ball. So that's trickle-down effect, whatever. So that's the one side of it. The other side of it is we're supposed to be rebellious. You're going to get in trouble sometimes when you say shit. But those are the people you say, go fuck yourself to. I realize Ellen's in a very different position I'm in. She's got the biggest talk show ever or whatever, So I realized, and look, that could be her dream, That could be what she wanted more than anything in the world. I don't know her. If it was, great. I get it. She's going to try to protect it or whatever. But, I mean, I don't know. I just feel like, I had people walk out of the show. I've had people walk out of the show almost every night. Not a lot, a few. And it kind of gets to you a little bit. But several comics here have said to me, And I haven't had a comic in the States say this to me in a while, but a lot of comics here have said to me, "Oh, dude, that means that's good. That's good. You don't want everybody to stay. That's great. You're not trying to make people leave. They're leaving because they're not feeling it. That means you're really being honest about yourself, you know? So, you know, I've had plenty of those people that have decided to walk out, write letters to clubs and try to get me banned and all these things. And I've had plenty of people on Twitter do the same thing because they didn't like an opinion I had about such and such. You know? And it's like, fuck off. Fuck all of you. You know? That's my motto. Fuck all of you.
The last thing I wanted to ask you about, and I don't know how sensitive a subject this is, so we can not talk about it if you don't want to, but I only discovered this morning, I was doing some sort of last-minute Googling, this kind of sustained Amazon review kind of hate campaign of which you are the target.
Yeah.
That's awful.
Yeah,
That's
it's not
awful.
great, but what
do you
want to
I mean, do you want to talk about it, or are you sick of talking about it? Do you not want to kind of mention
care.
it?
I mean, we can talk about it. I mean, it is what it is.
So, as I understand it, tell me if I've misunderstood. As I understand it, a bunch of fans of the Opie and Anthony show have sustained a campaign against you whereby, as a kind of, they're basically bullying you. They decided to vote. They're giving you 1-star reviews on everything that you put online to massively bring down the public perception of you and hit you in the wallet. Is that, if I understood?
Yeah, it was Anthony from Opie and Anthony and I had a beef for a little while. We're fine now. We've made amends and put it behind us. But when it did happen, people on his side of the argument started putting up a lot of fake reviews of my albums. So I was like, well, guys, if you're going to do it, get it done. So then I started telling people, like, give me 1-star reviews. Go ahead. I'm going to have 1 star for every album. If we're going to do it, let's do it. I don't want this fucking 3-star bullshit. Get them all down, you know? And doesn't matter. Made more money off my albums in the last 2 years since that's happened.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Great. There we go. That's the silver lining.
Like, exceptionally more.
Okay. Well, because of all the publicity of that.
I don't know. I'm not questioning it. Checks are coming in and they're fat. I'm just like, all right, cool.
That's
Nobody
great.
cares. You know what I mean?
That's great to
it's
hear.
Like, who cares? It's like...
Because when I read that, I was like, that's the worst thing I've ever heard. I can't imagine but think, oh, Jesus, what if someone did that to me? How could I cope? That's like, you know, that's a big part of your income. And if everyone's... I mean, obviously... If that helps, it's some insane, random internet way.
It is what it is, man. It's like, you know, yeah, who knows? Maybe they'll turn around one day. I don't know. But
I'm
like,
more interested in the psychology of it. Like, did you feel bullied by that? That's bullying, right?
I mean, yeah, by definition, sure. But, you know, it's like, I take my lumps, man. I never fucking whined about it. You know, I never went and did a BuzzFeed piece or some bullshit about it. Look what's happening. This is unjust.
Is that more because, I mean, to do that would presumably fuel the fire and loads more people would do it? I mean, was your silence on the subject, or you're kind of taking your lumps, is that partly because that's going to help it just die away sooner?
No,
or is it partly
because again, go fuck yourselves. Okay, fine. You want to give me 1-star reviews? Let's go. And they did. And some of them are fucking hilarious. I've read them on stage.
Right.
I've read them on stage to hilarious results. They're funny, man. Some of them are really funny. You know.
And
like,
yet the part of you who, when you have been doing shows up here and had some walkouts, the part of you that gets to, when you say, oh, that does get to you. I mean, there's, for all the kind of the punk rock aesthetic, I don't just mean the aesthetic,
well, that's
but
different.
The belief, you know.
That's different. The only reason it upsets me, it doesn't upset me. The only reason it disturbs me slightly when people walk out is that's a very different thing. That's me saying, man, I'm not trying to offend you right now. I'm really trying to just be honest about how I feel about certain things. And the fact that you're walking out makes me feel like you're not listening to me, or you're not hearing me, or I'm failing to translate my point. That's why that bugs me a little bit. but it's par for the course. It is what it is. Like I said, if you're going to say things about how you feel, there's going to be people you rub the wrong way. But yeah, it's like, what are you going to do, man? It's all part of it. It's all part of it. Lena Dunham, I guarantee you, has as many hateful 1-star reviews as I have. She's just also got way more people that gave her 5-star reviews, so it balances out. I happen to have I had an abundance of people coming at me hard with 1-star reviews in a very concentrated period of time. So, it's funny, man.
Are you happy?
Yeah. Yeah, man. As happy as I can be. I mean, I've always been a guy that's like, I'm a guy that's always going to be fighting having bouts with depression and stuff like that. Nothing too serious, but I have anxiety, I have depression. There's a reason I'm on Prozac. There's a reason I was in therapy for 2 years, whatever it was.
Have you completed that now?
7th time in my life.
Yeah, sure.
There's a reason I meditate. I do all these things because I have struggled with these things. But overall, yeah, I'm happy, man. It's like, look, dude, we're sitting in Scotland. We're sitting outside at a coffee shop. It's a beautiful day. You care enough to want me to talk on your podcast. I'm flattered. I have a show tonight. There's going to be 18 parties to go to after the show. There's going to be drinks. There's going to be girls to talk to. There's going to be comics to laugh with. What is there to be angry about right now? Now, that being said, I'll get angry 8 more times today because, like, my internet's not working right or whatever. You know what I mean? Or the guy is standing at the top of the staircase looking at his phone as I'm trying to get into my show. Yeah, shit like that sets me off. But yeah, I'm happy, man.
If you had from the different experiences of therapy and meditation, all the rest of it, what would be the one? What's the kind of magic bullet for anyone? Like, is there one thing you could say to people who are in a similar position? Like the most powerful lesson you learned about how to get out of it?
About how to get out of the funk?
Yeah.
There isn't. It's going to work differently for everybody. My solution was a combination of things. I needed Prozac, and I still do, to clear the noise out so I can look at things with a clear perspective. And then decide if I'm going to be upset about it or not. I didn't have the ability to do that without Prozac. Everything was bad first. Meditation's been incredibly helpful in helping me become patient, more patient, accepting. Even doing this today, like talking about things I don't like about comedy. I have people in my head that I think of when I'm saying that, but I just used to be in this place of that would make me so fucking angry, and it would take everything in me to not name names, and then usually I probably would have. And it's just like that's just not where I'm at anymore, Therapy helped too. But look, man, for some people it's praying. I don't know, For some people it's coloring, It's just like whatever it is for you. For some people it's not doing anything. Some people really like their anxiety and anger, So, so I don't know, It's you got it. There's a lot out there to research. I would tell people to do that. I really would. If it's not, you don't have to just live with it. The world we live in will make you feel like you're wrong. You're not wrong. We live in a fucked up world. People's voices are way too loud when you haven't asked for them to be. Okay? People can come into your life at any moment now and throw it into a tailspin if they really wanted to, with zero effort. There's a reason you feel anxiety. There's a reason you feel anger. There's a reason you start to feel rage. So go out there and explore all those things that you can explore, so you can start to figure out how to control it and not let your, I always say your brain's the classroom, you're the teacher, your emotions are the students. Your students can get out of control, but you're always the teacher. You can always get control back of the classroom, but you have to know how to do that. You can't scream at the students who are throwing spitballs and, whatever else they're fucking doing. You know what I'm saying? So go out there, man, because these people don't want you to figure it out. They don't want you to figure it out. The people that are inciting you and making your life miserable and all this shit, they don't want you to figure it out. They want you to stay confused and angry and feeling like it's your fault, because that's one less competitor they have now. You know what I mean?
Final question. You can interpret this however you like. What would you have on your comedy gravestone?
I don't know. I don't know. Oh, no, wait. I do know. I know exactly. I've literally said this. I was in San Francisco a year ago with Artie Lang, the comedian Artie Lang. There's also a promoter manager in Australia named Artie Lang.
No way.
I was with the comedian, the guy that used to be on Stern Show and who's hilarious and one of the greatest dudes of all time. I was in San Francisco with Artie. He came out with me. He was not drinking. I was drinking. He was kind enough as a sober man to partner me to bars for the night.
That's a good guy.
Yeah. And I was drunk, and I was like, I wanna go get a massage at one of these rub and tugs, and we went, and he paid for it, and I was like arguing with him at the door. I was like, stop it, you're not paying for this, and he goes, I wanted to say on my gravestone, I bought Joe DeRosa a hand job in San Francisco. And I go, I wanted to say on mine, Artie Lang bought me a hand job in San Francisco. So that's exactly what I want. I don't know if it'll make it onto the gravestone, but that'd be great, wouldn't it?
So that was Joe. Thank you very much to him for coming onto the show, and apologies once again that I mislaid the file and it's taken me so long to dig it out. Next week, I think it's a biggie. I'm not going to promise, but I think I'm going to put Reg Hunter out next week. Reginald D. Hunter, who I think is on tour at the moment, and it is an absolute knock-me-down blinder of an episode. You're gonna love it. It's really, we get very deep very quickly, as you might imagine, and it was one of those ones where I sort of found myself thinking, shut up, Stu, don't interrupt, don't say anything, just keep listening and keep creating that sort of environment where somebody can share quite as much as he did. I'm really excited about it, so I hope you enjoy that. So thank you as ever to Daryl for his constantly masterful and handsome work in producing this show. He makes my life so much easier than it might be, and I would like to publicly recognise that with a little hashtag thanks Daryl. I'd like you all to join in that, which I know means that the same 5 of you that join in all the hashtags will do that too, but that sounds more than I've done so before. So there's that. If you've emailed me recently, I will get back to you soon. I've been on holiday, as you know, at my brother-in-law's wedding, and very pleasant it was too. Lots of fun being in the Greek island of Santorini. You're just walking around this incredible kind of Star Wars rabbit warren landscape of beautiful little white villas and hotels, just going bride, 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 bride. It's crazy. Apparently Greek weddings are a thing. There's a film and everything. I genuinely didn't know. You know that film, My Big Fat Greek Wedding? I didn't realise that was based on the fact that Greeks are particularly good at weddings and lots of people go to Greece for weddings. I just thought it was a movie about a wedding that happened in Greece. Once again, Goldsmith shows up his incredible disconnection from culture. What is that? I'm sure I've spent my life... we're into post-Apple now territory, so goodbye for the podcast. Speak to you next week. Probably it'll be Reg. If not, someone excellent. Anne Edmonds is burning a hole in my hard drive, so maybe we'll do that one. But that concludes the show. Stick around for the post-Apple, which is now... So that I several things. I'll get to this email in a second. The point of the wedding. I know I lost my thread from earlier on, but that's what happens when you walk around a room talking to a phone. the point was that I do feel very disconnected from stuff. You remember the Andy Daly episode when I loftily explained to brilliant comedian Andy Daly that the reason that bit of the show didn't work for me the other night and didn't work so well at the Edinburgh Festival, I suspect, because we don't know who the Rockettes are. And then a million of you emailed me to say, well, obviously we know who they are because we all watch 30 Rock. And I mean, that's a particularly galling example because I watch 30 Rock and I love it, but I'm so busy. The way I enjoy things is I sort of let the stuff wash over me, and I'm just too busy sort of giddily giggling and frothing about the individual jokes to remember or take in any of the material. I've not been any of the information. I mean, I've not ever been one of those people that can tell you when a film was made. You know, someone you go, you know, The Godfather, and they go 19. I can't even improvise something. 82. I don't know. So many of my friends can do that. They can tell you what movies people have been in. They can tell you who won the Oscars one year. You know. They can tell you, for example, that Greece is a popular destination for weddings. I just think a lot of stuff has passed me by, and I do every so often think that purely from the sake of having a career, I should know what people are talking about. I remember doing the warm-up for an horrific daytime TV show many years ago, and someone was, I think it was, I don't remember her name, I'm going to say Stacey Solomon? Is that a thing? Someone who had been an X Factor type person was on the show, and their sister was in the audience, and whoever this person's name was, their sister was in the audience, and she said, oh, I'm so-and-so's sister. I happened to chat to her at random in the audience. I said, well, who are you? And she said, I'm so-and-so's sister. And I went, oh, really? Who's that? And everyone laughed because I wasn't watching X Factor, right? I'm not ashamed of that. I'm proud. But I do wonder if this is a thing I kind of adopted at school, which is to sort of deliberately disengage from cultural things as a means of somehow winning. Do you know what I mean? As a means of like, well, good, I don't know about that. Yeah, I don't get that. I don't want to be part of a competition where people have to try and prove in conversation that there's something is more important to them than anyone else. And I suspect through that, arguably, if not noble, then at least morally neutral goal, I think that's ended up. That was a survival thing at school where to not feel like I was less culturally educated than anyone else, to not feel like I was missing out. You know, I always had to do that with sport. People talk about people in football, and I'd go, yeah, I don't know, I don't care, la la la, and I don't care, and I'm fine with it. And I'd kind of turn that into a shit weapon, you know, some sort of crap foil shield. I would make the decision that, look, I don't care about it, so that's fine. And I think I may have overdone that. I think that's a less helpful strategy in adult life. How many times, if I ever get around to an autobiography, it will be some sort of neater version of this, some sort of literarily neater version of the sentiment. What seemed like a good idea as a survival technique at school is arguably of less importance now that I'm an adult. If someone could condense that into 3 words, pow, that's the title. So, anyway, I'm slightly gabbling, but I'm quite enjoying gabbling. Someone remarked on Twitter, I think, and I will get back to a week's worth of tweets later tonight, hopefully. But someone remarked on Twitter they enjoyed the rambling stream of conscious nature of the exercise freakout post-amble the other week. So, yeah, I quite enjoyed that as well. I think I'm probably a bit more honest if I talk fast. Bang! Autobiography title for the audiobook, which is set at double speed, or set at 16 times speed, so you've only got a limited number of times you can slow it down inside your audiobook app. Now, yeah, it's better, right? Better when I talk shit at high speed. So, my point is that's quite a weird thing, isn't it? To have decided as a kid to go, yep, don't watch it, don't know. Sport, don't care, no, not interested. No, TV, don't watch it, mate. It's crazy. So, maybe I should try and become a little bit more educated, or, and this is what someone would say if they were a comedy expert and had listened to an awful lot of these podcasts, they'd go, no, that's not. This Acaster said to me a couple of years ago on a plane. He said, that's funny actually, James is so successful now that's a name drop. How lovely. So Clang, James Acaster said to me on a plane that this is very smart. I'm going to have him on the show again, I think, hopefully soon, and we'll talk about this. he said those things that you feel. We were talking about some aspect of my set that I do. We were on the way to do shows together, and he said to me that those things that I consider weaknesses in my personality are traits, and that's the thing. That's the material. That's the basis. That's the voice. And I thought that was really intelligent. So there we are. Arguably, I think the conclusion I've come to is that it's okay to sort of despise culture and deliberately not watch anything or pay attention, because that's who I am. Great work, everyone. Thanks for your time. Really good, but that's interesting. I'm glad I've managed to just pop something to just cap that with an actually intelligent, interesting thing that someone else has said at the end of that, thus making a long, confused ramble somehow apposite. If that's the right use of the word apposite. That'll do. Oh no, I was going to read you this email. I will quickly read you this email. That would have been a good place to get out. But this is so lovely. I won't name the guy, and I'm redacting some of the details, but this is lovely. I wanted to write to say thank you. Dear Stu, I'm not going to redact my own name. It's addressed to me. I wanted to write to say thank you. I'm not any good at getting gushy, but I want to make a point I don't think you mentioned much on the pod. That is a way to grab my attention in your first two sentences. I enjoy comedy, but I'm not a fanatic. I've only been to a handful of comedy shows, and I don't plan to go to loads more. Ooh, now I am intrigued. You often talk about the show as a springboard that encourages people, aspiring comedians, to get up on stage and perform. I'd like to highlight that its reach is broader than this. I'm an aspiring architect with a passion for pottery. The link between these and comedy seems thin, but whilst I was working in a dead-end architecture office, wishing I could do pottery, I was listening to ComCom, and I found the conversations with comedians hugely relatable. I was struggling with working in a job that had sucked any love out of architecture and was questioning my life's path. I couldn't bring myself to do anything other than trudge in and out of work. Ugh. I struggled in a classic privileged white male kind of a way to express this to my friends, family or girlfriend. However, I continued to listen to you and found the humour and humility of the show my main source of support. This is really lovely, thank you. The process of so many of your guests mirrored the process of design I remember from my BA. It reminded me that process could be exciting or invigorating. Easy to forget. In particular, the Rachel Paris episode struck a chord, and I've since listened to it a number of times. Brilliant, wonderful Rachel Paris. Anyway, whilst this did not entice me to the stage, it enticed me to the pottery wheel. It had reminded me I needed to be doing things, to be creating things and sparking interest and excitement. To cut a long story short, it was the push I needed to go to pottery classes, which were the catalyst for rediscovering my creativity, and eventually applying to master's courses. I applied to institutions I never dreamed I'd be accepted to, and felt that just applying was a massive step. Somehow I was accepted by both, and have recently moved from the UK to blank to spend 2 years studying a master's in architecture. This is a dream I've been harbouring for the last 5 years, and a dream that never felt further away than when I first discovered The Comedian's Comedian. Thank you. And there's some really nice stuff, which I won't read because it's really nice. Oh no, that, and then thanks for reminding me, he goes on, that sometimes life is hard, even if it's tough, comedy can be a relief, and creativity is, for me, important in and of itself. Learning to reconnect with being creative without feeling a pressure to be good at it was crucial to applying for bigger things. Comedian's Comedian may not always convince people to be comedians. For me, it just convinced me to have a go, to express myself, to be creative, so thank you. Oh, thanks, man. Thank you. That makes me feel very happy. And I agree with you. Not in terms of like the show, obviously. I try to remain humble, read the show. But I agree with you that life is hard. Even if it's tough, comedy can be a relief. And creativity, that's the point. Creativity is important in and of itself. And it's really easy to lose sight of that, whether you're a comic trudging back from some cock-awful gig, or an architect thinking, oh, sod this, or, God forbid, I'm sure this happens, a surgeon taking out another fucking pancreas. It's hard, even no matter what level of anything you're doing. It can just be hard, and it can be repetitive, and it can get dull, and even if you're lucky enough to do something you love, and I'm sure people find joy and love in all sorts of their work, not just these kind of, supposedly high-level things like surgery and architecture, and to a far lesser extent comedy. Whatever you do, I'm sure you can forget that you love it, and actually just stepping back and going towards something you love, I think, is That's really inspiring. Thank you to mystery person who wrote this. I don't want to name this gentleman or which country he ended up training in, because I didn't ask if I could read this out. I sort of assume that unless a writer unless someone who emails the show says, please don't read this out, I sort of assume that's okay. But I thought I'd redact some details. But thank you, mystery guy. I really had an impulse there to just name you in the place. But thank you. Oops. Thank you, because I obviously I'm very touched by that. That's lovely, and I'm very pleased that you feel that way. I'm sure Rachel will be as well, and that's just really nice to hear about someone going, oh, fuck this, maybe I want to do this, and then pushing hard and working and letting it obsess them, and reconnecting with that. So thank you. That will do for now. Thank you, you for listening, you the listener. Thanks you the listener for doing that thing you do. And next week, more stuff. This is good. I got a really nice final thought. I had a really nice email recently from someone who said they've been listening for ages, and the last few, or the last however many, they've noticed it's gone up a gear. Thanks, mate. I fucking thought so. I'm not every single one. I think they're all good, but some of them I've been really pleased. I've been feeling like, I've come away more frequently thinking, that was a good one. So good. I hope you're enjoying them too. And that was an example of me being humble about the podcast. All right, bye for now. Speak to you soon.